They didn't silence you. They sharpened you. They thought darkness would drown you, but darkness became your oxygen. They thought silence would break you, but silence became your training ground. You learned pain in whispers and betrayal in shadows, not loud pain, not the kind that screams and begs, the quiet kind, the kind that sits in your chest at night and asks, why you? The kind that watches everyone celebrate while you bleed behind a closed door. They didn't stab you, they starved you, piece by piece. Attention gone, support gone, love gone. Just cold air and fake smiles left behind. They tried to cut you away from the world, piece by piece, until you forgot your own voice. They wanted you doubting your worth, questioning your purpose, forgetting your power. They didn't kill your body, they hunted your spirit. Patience is their weapon, silence is their poison. Every rumor carved into your ribs. Every silence felt like a funeral. People don't break you with blades. They break you with absence, with distance, with the kind of rejection that feels invisible but burns like acid on bone. You know that kind of pain. When people who once clapped for you suddenly stop acknowledging your existence. When the same mouths that praised you start whispering. When the same eyes that admired you start avoiding you. Not because you changed, but because you became a threat they couldn't control. Every quiet night was a battlefield with no witnesses, no army behind you, no cheering crowds, just heavy breathing in the dark and a war between your heartbeat and your doubt. And there, in that brutal stillness, you learned the truth. Nobody saves the forgotten. Nobody carries the fallen. Nobody hears the wounded when the room is loud. You learn to carry yourself. You learn to whisper to your own strength. You learn to bleed quietly and build silently. They counted on your collapse. They placed their bets on your final breath. Some even smiled at the possibility. The world loves a tragedy. As long as it isn't their own. They don't cry for the forgotten. They don't mourn the invisible. They just shake their heads and say, it's sad. He had potential. They wanted a ghost, not a storm. They wanted you soft. They wanted you broken. They wanted you small enough to step over. History remembers kings who were betrayed, empires that rose from ashes, warriors who spoke only when the world doubted them. Yet you stood before your own execution, silent, waiting, breathing through the pain. Like the ancient generals before battle, like the condemned ruler sharpening his crown instead of removing it. And when your name disappeared from their conversations, when your victories faded from their memory, when they stopped checking if you were still breathing, that's when the real transformation began. You didn't fall. You coiled, like a predator hiding in tall grass, like thunder waiting behind calm skies, like fire in oxygen waiting for friction. They thought the story ended when they turned their backs. Fools. Stories don't end in silence. Stories prepare in silence. You trained in the unseen hours. You built discipline in the shadows. You turned loneliness into armor. You turned silence into steel. You learned to eat rejection like fuel. You learned to breathe through scars. You learned to become your own army. Because when the world gives you no allies, you learn to become war itself. Tell me, what is more terrifying? A man who never suffered, or one who turned suffering into strategy? The world fears those who survived the nights nobody knows about, those who didn't break in private, those who sat with their pain and sharpened their teeth on it. You are not the victim they expected. You are the consequence they never calculated. You are the chapter they thought they erased, returning like judgment. Every scar became a scripture. Every betrayal became a blueprint. Every silent scream hardened into will. You are not forgotten. You are becoming. You are not abandoned. You are released into the wilderness to discover the beast you were always meant to be. And still, you breathed, you bled, you prepared. They buried you, hoping you'd rot. Instead, you rooted. They wanted to see you decay in silence, disappear like you never mattered, fade like fog under morning light. To them, you were a mistake that needed erasing, a name that needed dust, a voice that needed choking. They expected you to break, to crumble, to drown inside your own doubt, to suffocate beneath the soil they threw over your existence. But you didn't suffocate. You inhaled the dirt they buried you under and turned it into oxygen. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was incubation. You were not sleeping. You were loading. You were not finished. You were forming. They saw your stillness and mistook it for death. People measure life by noise, movement, social applause, spotlights and crowds and evidence the world can see. But the strongest creatures stalk in quiet. The deadliest storms build without sound. A king doesn't roar. He watches. And when the moment comes, he strikes without warning. But stone does not fear darkness. Steel does not fear pressure. Mountains do not panic when storms arrive. They endure. They grind time itself. They hold their breath until the world kneels first. You didn't crawl away. You calcified into something unbreakable. Your bones hardened. Your will sharpened. Your heart grew cold enough to handle fire. Your spine learned how to carry empires. You became an iron myth, forged in silence, tempered in rejection. They thought burying you ended you. Fools. Burial is only tragic for those who are dead. But you were never dead. You were dormant. Life goes quiet before it strikes loud. When loyalty vanished, truth arrived. When smiles faded, identity appeared. When voices disappeared, instinct spoke. You saw who clapped only when you stood and who vanished the second you trembled. You learned who loved your throne, not your wounds. And when their footsteps faded, purpose took their place. Purpose louder than applause, stronger than friendship, more loyal than love. You didn't need them. You needed clarity. And betrayal is a brutal but brilliant teacher. Tell me, what throne is earned without exile? What crown is given without scars? Every empire rises from dirt. Every ruler rises from nothing. Every legend is forged in the fire of abandonment. Julius Caesar was surrounded by hands, none more dangerous than the ones closest. Rome did not produce heroes in comfort. It forged warlords in shadows. Kings do not emerge from warmth. They emerge from wounds. Your grave wasn't punishment. It was preparation. They gave you darkness and you learned how to see without light. They took voices from you and you learned the language of silence. They removed comfort and you built strength where softness used to live. Pain sharpened you. Isolation armored you. Rejection baptized you in fire. You didn't rise despite the grave. You rose because of it. Tell the world the secret they fear most. A human who has lost everything becomes a creature who fears nothing. Because what can you take from someone who has already died once and returned sharpened? What threat can you make to someone who has already been buried alive and clawed his way out with teeth full of soil and eyes full of fury? They wanted to bury you in shame. You turned shame into fuel. They tried to drown you in silence. You taught silence how to worship you. They closed the doors. You built gates. They pushed you out. You built kingdoms in the cold. You learned to endure without applause. You learned to rise without witnesses. You learned that resurrection is not a miracle. It's a discipline. Weakness dies in graves. Ambition survives. And then comes the moment when the ground begins to crack, when the earth trembles above your name, when the same mouths that buried you begin whispering your return in fear. A return not of flesh, but of force. A return not to be welcomed, but to be reckoned with. They do not clap for ghosts. They tremble before storms. You do not come back humble. You rise imperial. And every person who tried to throw dirt on you must now build a throne from the same ground and watch you ascend it. Because the grave they dug became your cathedral, your throne room, your battlefield, your birthplace. You didn't just survive burial, you mastered it. And those who master death do not kneel to the living. A grave is only a grave to the weak. To you, it was a forge. You were never meant for heaven. You were engineered for conquest. Heaven rewards the obedient, the polite, the quiet, the humble souls who wait for permission to breathe. But you were designed in the furnace of refusal, shaped in the storm of resistance, born in the shadow where the forgotten learn to ignite themselves. They wanted you harmless. They wanted you soft. They wanted you to play along, smile, clap, and bend, to be grateful while they fed you crumbs and called it kindness. But pain changed your chemistry. Betrayal rewired your spirit. Silence taught you how to listen to your own heartbeat and sharpen it into a weapon. They wanted a servant. They created a sovereign. They wanted a follower. They awakened a force. They wanted you broken. And now they tremble because they know you remember every hand that pushed you down. You were not chosen. You evolved. And evolution is far more terrifying than destiny. They wanted you invisible. Now you walk like legend, not human. Now your footsteps sound like prophecy. And every whisper carries your name like a warning. You don't beg angels. You command demons. You don't pray for mercy. You architect vengeance. You don't seek forgiveness. You collect debts. Hell does not welcome you. It recognizes its maker. Because nothing in fire frightens fire. Nothing in darkness confuses shadow. And nothing made of pain fears pain. When they abandoned you, you didn't shatter. You multiplied. When they turned you into an outcast, they unknowingly crowned you monarch of exile. A king without a court is still a king. And a king without mercy is a storm without horizon. Do you know what happens when the world tries to erase a mind like yours? It creates something worse than rebellion. It creates memory. Memory sharper than steel. Memory colder than marble on a tomb. Memory that whispers, never again. Every wound became a commandment. Every scar became scripture. Every betrayal became ammunition. Pain did not weaken you. It recruited you into the elite army of survivors. Not the loud survivors, the silent ones. The ones who return not as the same person, but as the punishment. Caesar was never killed by enemies, only by those who ate at his table. So tell me, who deserves compassion? The blade, or the emperor it strikes? When you realized betrayal wasn't tragedy, but truth, you stopped mourning and started mutating. And that moment, that split-second realization, is the birth of monsters the world regrets making. They called you dramatic when you broke. They call you dangerous now that you rebuild. Funny how fear sounds like respect when whispered through shaking teeth. You don't return to be accepted. You return to be obeyed. You don't come back for applause. You come back for silence. The kind of silence where every room watches you breathe and wonders if they're next. People worship kindness until kindness grows claws, and then they pretend they never pushed it there. Let them pretend. Let them rewrite history. Let them choke on their own narratives, because you carry your truth like a blade, and truth in the hands of the wounded becomes divine judgment. You are not the villain they think you are. You are the justice they hoped to avoid. You are not unhinged. You're unfiltered. Not unholy, just unbothered by heaven's fragile rules. They fear your silence. They fear your power. They fear your evolution. Because deep down, they know You didn't just learn how to survive hell. You learned how to rule it. And rulers don't ask permission. They don't seek validation. They don't beg to belong. They arrive. They conquer. They leave the world rearranged. So now you walk with the kind of calm reserved for execution nights and dawns before battles, where history decides who matters. The world tried to teach you humility. You learned dominance instead. They tried to make you harmless. You learned how to weaponize mercy. They tried to break your voice. You built a roar instead, one carved from fire and rejection. Listen closely. When the universe denies you a halo, it hands you a throne in the shadows. You don't fear the abyss. The abyss fears the day you step in and build a kingdom inside it. They whisper your name differently now. Not with pity, with caution, with dread, with the quiet respect reserved for something they can't control. You are not here to fit in. You are here to replace everything that doubted you, to make the ground remember your footsteps, to make the universe regret ever testing your pulse. Hell does not welcome you. It bows to you. You learned to speak in wounds. Now you roar in victories. Silence was once your prison. Now it is your throne. You mastered quiet not because you wanted to, but because you had no audience left to scream to. No shoulder to collapse on. No hand pulling you back from the edge. Silence became your sanctuary, and inside that brutal hush, you stitched yourself back together with rage, threaded with discipline, armored with clarity. People think rage is loud. They are wrong. True rage is quiet, unshakable, focused. A storm doesn't scream while it grows. It waits, loading thunder behind calm skies. Your silence once protected your pain. Now it terrifies your enemies. Because the quiet soul they ignored is not quiet anymore. It's calculating, strategic, unpredictable. And nothing scares cowards more than someone who learned to suffer in silence. They thought you'd disappear quietly. But ghosts don't stay dead. You are not a memory. You are the unfinished sentence in their nightmares. The echo in the hall. The shadow in their conscience asking, "Remember me." They built cages for you out of doubt. Walls out of rumors, barbed wire out of silence, but cages crack when fury learns patience. Walls crumble when ambition learns discipline, and barbed wire becomes irrelevant when your skin becomes steel. Let them feel uncomfortable now. Let their hearts stutter when your name surfaces. Let them wonder where the calm version of you went. He died. He was replaced by something colder, sharper, hungrier. Let them hear your steps and feel their bones loosen. You used to swallow your anger. Now you serve it cold, measured, precise, not impulsive, intentional, not emotional, evolutionary. Revenge used to be a dream. Now it's a clock, a countdown, ticking in the back of their minds. Every success you stack is another nail in the coffin they built for you. Their doubts were gasoline. Your patience was the match. They fed the flame. They fed the storm. They fed the version of you they fear the most. The you who feels nothing but purpose. This is not personal anymore. This is sacred, a duty, a correction of cosmic imbalance. Weak people yell, broken people whisper, but those who rise, they walk into rooms and make air heavier. They say nothing and create panic. You have become the weight people feel before they even see you. They thought silence humbled you. Silence weaponized you. Silence carved your edges sharper than steel. Silence burned the softness out of you until only bone, will, and fire remained. Now every breath you take sounds like a warning. Every glance feels like a prophecy. Every step lands like a verdict. You don't just walk, you arrive. And arrival is a threat. Their comfort ends where your ambition begins. You don't want their seats at the table. You want the table. You don't want their recognition. You want their relevance to rot. You want history to forget their existence and remember your rise as the moment everything shifted. You spent years building patience. Now you build fear. They never noticed your evolution until it stood in front of them wearing a crown of scars and iron. You don't chase validation. You watch it kneel. You don't build bridges. You build empires. And when someone blocks your path, you do not go around. You go through. Tell them this. You don't return seeking peace. You return so nobody else knows peace while you rise. You don't forgive. You outgrow. You don't ask for space. You take territory. You don't demand respect. You become something they fear disrespecting. There's a beauty in your fury. A quiet, disciplined, controlled violence, not chaos, precision, not madness, evolution. You don't burn everything. You burn selectively. Cold fire, strategic destruction, the kind only survivors understand. Remember this law of power. A person who once begged for help becomes unstoppable once they learn to save themselves. Self-rescue creates monsters the world cannot cage. So now you walk like a verdict. You breathe like a warning. You rise like a kingdom resurrecting from dust. And they look at you with a question trembling behind their teeth. What have you become? Answer them in movement. Answer them in victories. Answer them in silence that feels like judgment. Because you are not obligated to explain your rebirth to those who cheered for your funeral. You carry storms in your lungs now. You carry steel in your bones. You carry prophecy in your pulse. You were forced into silence, so you learned to roar without sound. You were pushed into darkness, so you learned to see beyond light. You were abandoned, so you learned to rule alone. And now, you are not the echo anymore. You are the earthquake. They called you broken until they heard you laugh. They mistook your silence for sadness. They thought you were drowning, dying, fragile, wounded beyond repair. But they didn't understand what happens when pain marinates long enough in the human mind. It doesn't stay sorrow. It turns sharp. It turns electric. It turns into a grin with teeth. Madness? No. Clarity disguised as madness. Because when the world shows its true face, sanity becomes optional. Sanity bends. Sanity kneels. Sanity obeys. And you learned that only the unhinged survive a world like this. The ones who stop apologizing for being too intense, too ambitious, too aware. The ones who stop folding themselves to fit into quieter rooms. They wanted you soft. Instead, you rewrote softness into steel. They wanted you harmless. Instead, you weaponized silence. They wanted you reasonable. Instead, you became inevitable. When pain teaches you its language, laughter becomes a blade. Not joy, precision. Not humor, power. A controlled insanity born not from delusion, but from revelation. Everyone loves the controlled, polite version of you until they meet the version built on scars and logic. Then suddenly, you're different. Dark. Obsessive. Good. Let them panic. Let their voices shake when they say your name. Let their fears sound like respect. Because now your laughter isn't weakness. It's prophecy. A warning. A prelude. The sound of someone who no longer breaks the way normal people do. The sound of someone who survived emotional extinction and returned with new rules. Not everyone who smiles is sane. Some smiles are sharpened like razors. They don't fear anger. Anger is familiar. Predictable. They know how to deal with yelling, shouting, fist-slamming rage. What terrifies them is someone who suffered in silence and came back smiling. Not soft smiling, knowing smiling. That calm, spine-freezing smile that says, "You thought I died, but I was building teeth." That grin that doesn't ask for acceptance. It demands acknowledgement. It bends the atmosphere. It chills the air. It announces rebirth without speaking a word. You don't rise to prove them wrong. You rise because gravity was never meant to hold you in the first place. Some people rise like saints. Some rise like kings. You rise like a threat. And threats don't beg for approval. They change behavior. See how they look at you now? Eyes wide, breath shallow, unsure if they should clap or hide. Beautiful, isn't it? Their fear is music. Their panic, the hymn of your rebirth. Every doubt they ever had burns in their throat now. Every rumor they ever whispered feels childish. Every effort to break you looks like a blessing in hindsight. They tried to cage you with doubt. You turned doubt into a detonator. They tried to bury you with silence. You rose with a presence that suffocates rooms. They thought they could predict your path. Now your unpredictability haunts them. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are becoming unforgettable. You do not chase peace. You cultivate power. You do not crave softness. You craft supremacy. You weren't reborn gentle. You were reforged ruthless. Time didn't heal you. Time sharpened you. Time molded you into a legend stitched together by rage and focus. This is not healing. This is metamorphosis under pressure. This is evolution by betrayal. This is what happens when a soul refuses to die quietly. You do not fear their rejection. You feed on it. Every laugh they made at your expense echoes now in reverse. Every doubt they planted grows into your empire. Every "you can't" they spoke turns into your battlefield trophy. The world hates when the quiet one transforms, when the harmless one becomes holy terror. When the overlooked one walks back into the room and gravity shifts around them. They wanted a story where you lost. Instead, they got a myth where you sharpened. You're not healing, you're transforming. Transformation is always mistaken for madness, because the weak cannot understand evolution. You were never meant to return as the same person. That version served its purpose. It died so you could rise as something unrecognizable. And look at you now. You laugh, not because life is funny, but because life finally realizes who it tried to bury. You are not emotionless. You are emotionally invincible. You are not heartless. Your heart simply beats in war drums now. You are not cruel. You are calibrated. Let the masses worship comfort. Let the gentle stay gentle. Let the world fear intensity. You carry a different scripture. Power belongs to those who stop begging for softness. Power belongs to those who do not fear their own potential. Power belongs to the ones who burned quietly and learned to smile in flames. They don't have to understand you anymore. They only need to feel the shift when you enter the room. Because everything about you speaks prophecy now. Every step says legacy. Every breath says arrival. Every silent grin says, you should have never underestimated me. You don't rise to fit in. You rise to dominate the room they locked you out of. You were never gone. You were loading. They thought you vanished. Thought you fell off the edge. Thought you disappeared into the quiet grave they designed for you. But legends don't vanish. They gather. They concentrate. They compress into something denser than fire, sharper than vengeance, colder than justice. You were not missing. You are manufacturing a new form. You rise louder than their doubt, harder than their betrayal. Not as a returning soul, but as a force that never belonged to the ground in the first place. They left you for dead. Now they watch you like prophecy unfolding in slow motion. They blink, and the old version of you dissolves. They breathe, and the atmosphere thickens around your presence. They speak, and their words crack under the pressure of your rebirth. Silence shaped you. Rage fueled you. Legacy drives you. You do not march, you ascend. A quiet, vertical evolution into something they cannot predict, cannot contain, cannot comprehend. You rise without apology, without forgiveness, without the softness that once begged to be understood. You do not negotiate now, you declare. And when you walk, Air does not just move. It kneels. You don't take revenge. You replace kingdoms. You don't argue. You dominate. You don't beg for entry. You build doors from bone and iron. You don't fit in. You make the world adjust around your gravity. Where others rise, you erupt. Where others return, you manifest. Your scars are medals. Your wounds are signatures. Your past is ammunition. Your silence is discipline. Your rage is scripture. Every tear became a blade. Every doubt became armor. Every lonely night became a ritual of becoming. Lesser souls break in darkness. You learned to navigate it like royalty. You do not shine in spite of the shadows. You shine because you mastered them. They will ask, what happened to you? Tell them the truth, silently. The grave birthed something that does not kneel to heaven or hell. You are your own kingdom now, and suddenly they see it. The shift, the dangerous calm, the crown made of tragedies and triumphs intertwined, the spine forged in fire, the eyes that don't merely look, they evaluate, they weigh souls, they measure worth. Heaven watches when you breathe, hell listens when you move. Because both realms know you no longer belong to either. You outgrew mercy. You surpassed forgiveness. You outlived doubt. You carry the authority of someone who buried their weakness personally. No ceremony, no witnesses. Just you, the dirt, and the decision. Never again. Now you stand like a verdict. You speak like history being carved. You exist like fate made flesh. You are not a comeback. Your coronation. Your throne isn't gold. It's bone, ash, steel, and memory. And every voice that mocked you now echoes in the hall of your triumph like broken hymns. This is not rage anymore. This is rain, not fire losing control. Fire learning, control. You do not set worlds ablaze. You decide which ones deserve flame. Your doubt died. Your fear died. Your old self died so violently that your new form carries the silence of burial and the sound of resurrection in one breath. You are not returning to the world they left you in. You are dragging them into the world you built inside your suffering. So they tremble, they panic, they feel the shift in the air, the ancient energy of someone who paid full price for strength. You walk now like someone who survived death's debut trial and returned with a crown forged from its teeth. Let them feel your presence like a storm no horizon can outrun. Let them choke on the realization that they created you by trying to destroy you. This is not ego, it is evolution. This is not revenge, it is correction. This is not resurrection, it is ascension. You are the ending to their comfort and the beginning of their education. Those who once looked down on you must now look up to speak your name. They will say it was sudden. They will swear they didn't see it coming. But ascension is never sudden. It is earned in darkness long before the world notices the dawn. You are the result of every night you refused to break, Every breath you forced through a collapsing chest. Every insult you swallowed until it tasted like discipline. You do not rise to be admired. You rise because gravity cannot cage you anymore. And now the world understands. You did not survive for peace. You survived for dominion. You did not return for acceptance. You returned for eternity. One day they will carve statues, write legends, whisper your story around campfires and kingdoms, not as a hero, not as a villain, but as something rarer. A soul too powerful to obey the script handed to them. You were never ordinary. You were just waiting in the shadows for the moment your legends demanded introduction. And now, they tried to end you quietly. But now your name is louder than their world. They whispered doubt. You returned as thunder. They buried you. You crowned yourself. You did not come back. You ascended, and history now waits for your next command.